My father was a coal miner, and we spent the first 7 years of my life moving to different coal mining areas. Coal miners have a great reverence for the soil, for their gardens, for what they cook, for the traditions. My grandmother had a magnificent garden that had every kind of bean and tomato and potato and fruit tree and so forth. And she was a fascination to me, and because some of the children, including my mother, were born in Italy. And I always wanted to know more about Italy, and please teach me some Italian. And I was protected from that because everyone wanted to be 200% American. So that was a little part of me that was never quite satisfied. The Johnstown Concert Ballet represents my first step, getting my toes wet as far as volunteerism.
Rosemary is the most congenial, hospitable, mediator, ambassador, representative of Johnstown that anyone could find.
And then I was also active beyond that with the Chamber of Commerce, Cultural Affairs Committee, with the band shell, and with the Symphony Orchestra, with the Southern Alleghenies Museum of Art. But it all started with the ballet and the fact that the ballet was enriching the lives of young people.
She is just the spark. She is just definitely a nice, quiet, humble, unassuming spark who does so much.
With the National Folk Festival coming, and coming right to this neighborhood, these 10 blocks, there was all of a sudden this great pride that every person had, and they were wearing these shirts that said, "I'm proud of being Italian or Hungarian or Slovak or German or Irish," or whatever it was. And 3 years in a row, this was just wonderful. You saw you experienced not only the performing artists, but also the visual artists from all these wonderful folk traditions. But this happened just once a year. Or shouldn't there be a place where ethnicity is celebrated all year round? So that was the beginning of the thought of having an ethnic arts center. And we sat down with Richard Burkert, and we carved out a mission for an organization that would celebrate heritage and tradition. And then the challenge was to find a place, a center, and where else but in Cambria City. And here was this building, which was the Tulip Bottling Company, and they made soda pop here, and it was called Tulip because the tulip was a flower of Hungary, which is part of an ethnic tradition.
I remember the first time that Rosemary took me into this abandoned building and said, "Look what we can get and look what we can do with this place." And we were checking out things and windows and were things up to code and what would have to be done. And we knew from the very beginning that it would take a substantial financial investment.
I'm Mrs. Jakovitz, whose family owned this Tulip Bottling Company, was a great deal of help to us.
Rosemary is first and foremost to people a friend, and whenever she reached out to Esther Jakovitz, she reached out to her as a friend and thought that Esther might be interested in preserving a little bit of the memory of the Tulip Bottling Company. And Esther had such fond memories of working there, of her family owning the place, that she was more than happy to get involved.
That was in 1993 that we started, but we had the Johnstown High School students do a mural on the side of the building just so people knew we were here, and then we concentrated on the inside.
It's kind of like Tom Sawyer painting that white fence. All of a sudden, it's work, but everybody thinks it's fun, and there are teams and hordes working, and a lot is getting accomplished.
The neat thing about the mosaic is just not dressing and draping a building. It actually represents volunteer efforts of 200 people who came together, who didn't even know what the Bottle Works was or had never even been here, but they had an opportunity to be part of something that was much larger than themselves. And every inch of it, every inch of that huge mosaic, 2 stories high and 45 feet long, was touched by human hands. And that is strong, and that is, again, a point of pride. This particular exhibit we have now is actually about the power and the utility of of quilting to hide symbols that the slaves could read and could find a way how they could escape from their imprisonment and how they could be free by following the symbols in the quilts through the Underground Railroad. And we have another project that's going to happen soon, and that is a garden that we hope to have outside. Getting back to all the gardens that you see in Cambria City and in Wimber and the various neighborhoods of Johnstown, a point of pride, a sacred place, and going back to my childhood where I again experienced these gardens, these restful places.
The garden should be exquisite, a little zen, peaceful place in Cambria City with, of course, a bottle which will reflect back on our heritage, our roots as the Tulip Bottling Company. But it's such a great story.
We now have all of these cultural venues. We have Bottle Works, we have Artworks. Around the corner from us is VOMA. Down the street 3 blocks is the Johnstown Heritage Association, the Children's Museum, the Wagner Ritter. Now we have the churches that have been bought by 1901 Church. All of a sudden, this is the place for people to come and to walk around and learn more by coming into these spaces than they knew before. When you think of heritage and tradition, you might think of older people, your parents and your grandparents. The only way to really make heritage important and for it to become a living, breathing fiber of our lives is to start with young people and to make them aware, to make them appreciative, to make them, help them identify themselves, the importance of themselves, and what their heritage and tradition means to them, so that as they grow up, they have those traditions, even if it's how to make ravioli, how to make a stir fry. All of these things are important. If we can hold on to them, then they become part of the fabric of our lives.